Welcome in to Big Ten Today. It is the famed Monday Schmooze. We're presented by Rally House. Great to have you with us, Dave Revson and Jake Butt. Good to have you making a Monday appearance, my friend.
I know. It's great to see you, Dave. Normally we're previewing the games.
Yes.
Couple big games last weekend that we're going to get the chance to talk about. I'm excited.
There were a few, and we are anxious to talk them through, not just with Jake, but also with Yogi Roth, who is back from Bloomington after getting a chance to see the Hoosiers up close and personal. How you doing, Yogi?
You know, I'm doing great. It's a Monday. I was able to go through a lot of the film, and I'll tell you what, I found out there's some real adults in running back rooms watching this thing back, a physical out. And Jake, I got to imagine there's a version of you that wish you were Ty Warren over the weekend. So excited to break it all down with you, man.
He's special. I never got Wildcat opportunities, and I never got to throw it. So I was living vicariously through him. That dude had a phenomenal game.
He did indeed. High school quarterback. And you could see some evidence of that this past weekend. Let's get to our big story, the weekend that was in the Big Ten. And the big board shows us it started early with Illinois' OT win on Friday night at Nebraska. It was one of two battles of ranked teams. The other was Michigan's win over USC. Iowa captured Floyd of Rosedale, while Washington made its debut in conference play by shutting down Northwestern. But as you see, we have focused in on USC and Michigan there. So let's start there. All of those who might have wanted to write off the defending champs need to think again. It was not pretty, Jake, but it was a win, and it was a win that Michigan fans will savor.
It was pretty in its own way. It was beautiful. That was even throwback, smash mouth, classic Michigan football. And that was a different team than we'd seen all season. And yes, Alex Orji was the starter, but from an emotional standpoint, from an execution standpoint, of course, the defense played phenomenal. They were in the backfield all day. But to get the run game going and to win against a USC team that is certainly much improved, throwing for less than 40 yards on the day is extremely, extremely impressive. We're seeing a star emerge in Kaleb Mullings. Donovan, you still get to see that home run pop. Great. But Kaleb Mullings is running back one for this team going forward. I thought the offensive line played their best game. Giovanni El-Hadi, the right guard, he sprung two of those runs, those long runs. Miles Hinton, the left tackle, he's playing his best ball. Max Bredesen, fullback, he's the emotional leader that brings it all together. So, you know, as we look forward, Dave, the margin for error is slim if they can't figure out a way to pass the football. But they can win games playing this physical run game. The offensive line has to continue to improve, but overall, a real solid day.
Yogi, what'd you make of it?
I was into it. I felt for the person sitting next to me on the plane coming home from Indiana because I was screaming and cheering the entire time, man. So thank you. Big love to the airlines, American Airlines, for making sure that I could watch that game on the way back. But I'll say this. Number one for me, I know Alex Orji's numbers weren't great, but to me, the number one element of quarterback play is, can you be confident? Can you play confident? And I just look forward to watching him continue to grow and evolve. And I think that they're going to have a shot to continue to make noise based on what we all saw when we were there in training camp. We went into the indoor and just watched him spin it. It's not like he can't pass, right? They know that they struggle. We all know that they struggled in the throw game, and he hasn't done a lot of that thus far through the first few weeks of the season. But ultimately, I just want to see him grow. I can't wait to watch his confidence continue to grow. Because you're right, Jake. They're going to have to throw the football. They're going to have to complete a few balls in the red zone on a third down, make spot throws, things that he hasn't been asked to do or hasn't done thus far this season. But this team is a physical out defensively. Look, they didn't blitz nearly like they did in the early parts of this season, but they got home with 3, at times 4 players into the backfield in Miller Moss's face all game long. So, look, the future is always going to be bright in Michigan. I think they needed this win because it was getting a little gray out there just based on all the changes and struggles that they had, especially in the Texas game a couple weeks ago. But I like where this team is at. I'm so intrigued to watch them continue to compete and watch the progression of now QB1 and in the moments where they're going to need him, because he's going to have to complete big balls in big games. I think he can do it. We're just going to have to wait and see if it does actually happen.
Well, we haven't really seen evidence of that. And again, look, the defense, to your point, was really good. They got in Miller Moss's grill, 4 sacks. They had 8 tackles for loss. on the game, but he completed 7 passes, Orgy. 6 of them were behind the line of scrimmage. So, again, look, you do what you need to do to win. And I thought what Sharon Moore said afterwards was very telling. He said, we won, and we beat a really good football team. And that's all you can ask for. And whatever way you do it comes away with a W. But I do think the question is it sustainable? And I hear what you guys are saying about confidence and how Orgy carried himself. But you complete 1 pass beyond the line of scrimmage, I do think it is fair to question how sustainable it is while still absolutely respecting how impressive and important this win is.
Absolutely. And it lowers their ceiling. Like, that's just the truth of the matter, right? And I think for Sharon Moore, he's asking himself, does what Orgy provide to us in the run game give us a better chance than maybe the risk of some of the mistakes we've seen when Davis Warren was at quarterback? But, you know, when they did use him creatively, they run a ton of different run schemes: quarterback power, base run, gap scheme, counter, jet sweeps. The screens are an extension of that run game. So they did have a diverse game plan to kind of give USC some different things to think about. But again, the margin for error is slim. And the good thing, Dave, just to go back to the defense and to emphasize Yogi's point, if they play like that, they can beat anybody. That defense will keep them in every game. That was the best performance of the defensive line by far all season. They reminded the world that that's the best D-line in college football. Yogi brought up a great point, and I got the stats to back it up. In terms of 5-man pressures, that was the lowest amount of 5-man pressures they brought all season, the second fewest of 6-man pressures. So Wink Martindale said to those 4 guys up front, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, you guys have got to get home. And they were in the backfield on 24 of 55 dropbacks. I give a lot of credit to Miller Moss because he just kept picking himself up. He's a tough kid and made some big-time throws. But that defense played to an absolute standard, and if they can't throw the ball, that's how they'll have to be all year.
Yeah, look, I think the bottom line when we're looking at this team, when they get into the next couple games, I want to see when they're down where they go on offense, right? I think when you look to your point, Jake, the nature of the game, they're up early. Okay, let's just try to squeeze the life out of USC. Let's run the football. Let's control the clock. And we all know coaches, especially those that love the ground game, or as I think they say, like they just like shredding the meat or whatever it might be coming from a vegetarian. I just think that ultimately for them, if they get down, I want to see where do they go? Where does Kirk Campbell go in the passing game? I just say that, you know, in practice, we saw him throw. We saw him not just run zone read and RPOs. Like, we know that he's capable of doing that just from an arm talent standpoint. I just want to see it when the lights are on. And I look forward to them being down in those types of situations. And then I think lastly for SC, look, I know it was a big loss out here in LA. It's a big deal, whether it's play calling, situational football. But the growth from SC from year 1 to year 2 is tremendous. I think that while they are behind the 8 ball a little bit right now, as you look at the standings, they'll have every shot to go compete and win every game they have this season and have everything right in front of them moving forward.
There's just less margin for error now for USC. I mean, in this 12-team playoff world, you absolutely can still make it. The defense really played well in the second half. I mean, they had held Michigan to 19 yards until that last drive where Mullings broke off the big run. But then you look at the games they still have left, starting this week with Wisconsin. They have Penn State. They have Notre Dame. They have Washington. You can probably afford to lose one more. I don't know that you can afford to lose 2. We'll find out here in year 1 of this 12-team playoff era how many you can afford to lose. But again, that was one that was there for the taking, and they just weren't able to take it.
To Yogi's point, it's clear that they've taken that stride. And even on those long runs, that last run that Kaleb Mullings, broke to set up the go-ahead score, that was a good form tackle. That was a double leg takedown, but Kaleb Mullings is just so strong. He bounced 2 guys off of him. So, yes, they had every chance to win. Michigan was just better in the critical moments down the stretch.
A few self-inflicted wounds, obviously, down the stretch, part of the issue as well for USC. So we go from one of the newest conference rivalries to one of the oldest, 118th meeting, Iowa and Minnesota. It went to the Hawkeyes. Another huge game for Kaleb Johnson. Career-high 206 rushing yards, 3 TDs. It gave Kirk Ferentz his 199th win at Iowa. Ties the great Amos Alonzo Stagg from the early days of the Big Ten at the University of Chicago for the second most wins all-time in the league. He is within 6 of Woody Hayes now for first all-time, so might have a chance to go after that this year. The pass game wasn't great, Yogi, and this is the second time that they've faced a power conference opponent this year, and both times the pass game hasn't looked great. But the run game is phenomenal. with Johnson, who may be one of the best backs, if not the best back in the country, and the defense came through, particularly in that second half.
Look, it's a new look league. You referenced the new look college football playoff. Well, this was like the old school look of Big Ten football. I feel like for me, just watching this one back, you're saying, okay, up and down the field in the first half, you're watching Minnesota find some success, and then boom, the clamps are put on this offense in the second half. And I referenced it off the top, adults running the football. That's what it looked like in this ball game in the backfield. I mean, it was just dropping the shoulder, running through tackles, leg drive off the hook, man. I mean, I watched this ball game. I'm saying, whoa, okay, Iowa. Like, we know what the schedule is. We know who they have upcoming, and we know what the league is. But, man, I cannot wait to watch them play against the best defense they'll probably face all season in Ohio State coming off a bye week. But, man, they must feel amazing after the style in which they won that game. Kaleb Johnson, come on, man. I don't know who could have tackled him in the second half. The length of the runs, the explosive runs, the offensive line leaning on people, going back to that scheme, and then even how they're doing schemes. Like, they've adjusted. They're not just true outside zone anymore. There's a mid-zone run game right now. It's a really fun group to watch. You're right. Much like Michigan, they are going to have to throw the football if you want to compete and make noise in the CFP. But I like the improvement from the Iowa State game to the Minnesota game over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I look at this offense and look, yeah, they didn't get much out of the pass game, but they put up 31 points in a rivalry game against a Minnesota defense that has 2 shutouts already on the season. So, okay, yes, they'd like to get more going, but the offensive line to me is the biggest difference. And this has been Iowa's bread and butter when they've won a lot of games. It's been on the offensive line. This is one of the more experienced groups in the conference, and each year they're just getting a little more better, a little better, and then you get to see the talent of a guy like Kaleb Johnson. One guy that jumped off on film to me was right guard Connor Colby. He was at the point of attack, pulling around in zone from the first place to the last, pancaking dudes, driving them down on the field. It was a really beautiful performance. And then in the second half, too, Phil Parker, just the adjustments at halftime. That third quarter was the difference in this game, obviously. The adjustments to shut down what Minnesota was doing in the pass game with Max Brosmer and Daniel Jackson out wide. It was just a good team win for Iowa.
The thing that's interesting to me about Minnesota, and you talk about the pass game, is Max Brosmer, he made a couple mistakes, certainly in that second half, and some plays they'd like to have back. But it feels like, at least early on here, in some ways, the pass game has been better for Minnesota than the run game. They're averaging about 3.8 yards per carry. This is a team that leans so much on its run game, that has one of the best offensive linemen in the country in Ariante Ursary.
Yes.
And yet it has been the pass game for them. What do you think's going on offensively, and why they haven't been able to kind of do what they like to do, which is control the football with that run?
I just think teams are sitting there, and just like we know it, so does Phil Parker, so do the opposing defenses, and they can overcommit to stop the run. And what happens when you talk about some of the mistakes in the second half is that's Phil Parker, and that's a veteran defense starting to pick up on cues and read what Minnesota was doing to try to take advantage of them. It was the opposite when they played Iowa State, though. Iowa State made their halftime adjustments and beat Iowa late. This time, Iowa made their halftime adjustments and won the battle of the second half versus Minnesota. But it's a team game. It all comes together. The defense benefits from a run game that controls the clock. The run game benefits from knowing they can commit to it because their defense is going to shut down opponents.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how Minnesota recovers here, because now they're going up against this Michigan rushing attack this week. And it's a program that prides itself on running the ball and stopping the run. And at least in that game against the Hawkeyes, we're not able to do it. The great Gus Johnson on the call there. The third longest run in Ohio State history, longest since Eddie George in his Heisman season 29 years ago. Quinshon Judkins, 2 TD runs. Travion Henderson, 2 as well. Now 9 scoring runs between them this year. They both have 36 career rushing touchdowns. That is tied with Devin Neal of Kansas for the most among active players, and they play for the same team. It's a pretty good duo. It has not been the toughest schedule, Yogi, but they have been completely dominant. So how much do you read into it? Do you believe that the Buckeyes, coming off their non-conference slate, are the team to beat in the Big Ten? Is it clear-cut?
I clear-cut, TBD. Would I put them number one? Without question. I think there's a few reasons why. One is that, at least on film, they've improved every week as well. You go back to the opener against Akron. You go and watch Western Michigan. Like, there's moments in those games you're trying to find some chinks in the armor. You're saying, okay, where are they on the offensive line? Quarterback wasn't great in the first game, at least in the first half. Like, you can find some things if you're nitpicking. But now where you watch them and the trajectory, especially I love what they did off of a bye week. I think they went back and they treated it just like a game week for the most part. They just went right back to work. And that's what it looked like when you watched it back from this past weekend. You referenced the running backs, explosive playmakers. They've just got better players than most of the teams that they're facing, of course. But the execution, and I like little things like wide receivers blocking downfield, linebackers, safeties fitting runs, like the little things that you're looking for. I know they got to clean up kickoffs, right? Like that's an issue for sure and for real. But I just think that they're so mission-minded. It's such a veteran element. It's such a physical out. You talk about adults in the room at running back. They got multiple. Like, they are, to me, the number one team in this league. Clear cut, I think it's a little early, especially because they haven't seen them strap it up against a team that some other teams have played, right? Whether it's a Power 4 opponent or somebody even in their own conference. So we'll get that, of course, the next couple weekends. But I don't know where the weaknesses are. I mean, I think to beat them, they're going to have some self-inflicted penalties, some self-inflicted turnovers, things where they're going to have to hurt themselves to give an opponent an opening.
Do you want a Michigan guy's opinion on your question?
Sure.
Yes, I think they are the clear-cut team. So there you go. And I agree with everything Yogi said, and I just think about the explosiveness on their offense. You know, each team, maybe they have like one guy that they say, hey, he's the one that we're going to throw a deep ball to, or hey, maybe if our running back breaks a crease, he can take it for 6. They have 4, maybe 5 guys. Both running backs can score from anywhere. You got Jeremiah Smith, you got Ibuka, you got Carnell Tate, even Brandon Inniss is a weapon. So, like, you can rattle this off and say, what do you take away? Well, Ohio State has a counterpunch to that. As we go down the season, if they want to be the clear cut, there's little minor things. You know, I called the Ohio State game week 2, and we talked for about 5-10 minutes with Ryan Day about the emphasis of special teams. You know, him giving up play calling duties allowed him to do a full offseason study on special teams. Well, they're kicking the ball out of bounds. There's
3
penalties.
times.
Think about that, right? When you play better teams, that's a significant thing. Yes, exactly. Defensively, little adversity in the first half. That third down is when this defense has to be at their best. That defensive line is dominant. The secondary should shut down just about anybody. They gave up 6 conversions on third down in the first half. Adjusted, only 1 in the second half. So it's okay to not be perfect. Can you respond when it is less than perfect, which is what the Buckeyes did?
Leading the Big Ten in total offense and total defense, which is
that's good.
That's a nice combination to have, no doubt. Penn State played the team that was last in the nation in both total offense and total defense, and the result was somewhat predictable. They rolled up 718 yards against Kent State. That erased the previous school record set nearly a century ago against the Susquehanna Crusaders in an 82-0 whitewashing. It was not a great Crusader team, and by all indications, this is not a great Kent State team either. Penn State outgained them by 651 yards, the largest gap in a game between 2 FBS teams this century. It is fair to point out, as I said, Kent State is not very good. However, you were there.
Yes.
What did you make of Penn State's utter and complete annihilation?
Well, first off, you know, people were asking, like, what do you do in a game like this when it's so lopsided? I said, we had so much fun covering that, you know, the race to see if they could break that record.
You guys did a great job, to your credit, of keeping people up to date on this is the record and keeping people around and updating them. Got into some tricky math.
Yes, that was, and as a Michigan, I was using all of my brain output to get there. But and that record had stood for 100 years.
Yeah.
So it was fun. What my big takeaway is, you know, the identity of this team has shifted, at least at this point in the season. Last year, it was that Manny Diaz defense. They were top in the nation in every single statistical category. And now I look at it, especially coming off the Bowling Green game, which told us more than the Kent State game. The offense is the identity, and it's led by their offensive coordinator, Kodal Nicki. I think he's unlocked another level of confidence for Drew Aller. We've known he's had the talent, but what he's put on tape to start the year has been really impressive. And I think what's most impressive and most encouraging is we said, who's going to be the wide receiver 1 for Penn State? Well, we saw Trey Wallace. Tyler Warren certainly, I mean, he could win the Mackey this year. He's that good. The running backs look great. But in this game specifically, they get Julian Fleming involved. They get some production from Amari Evans over the top. They get Liam Clifford involved as well. And the offensive line is playing good. So all of a sudden, we could look back at the end of the year, Dave, And the hire of the offseason very well could be Andy Kotelnicki for Penn State. It looks like a different unit.
You referenced the offense of Ohio State and how, like, who do you take away? I think when I look at the offense of Penn State, there's nobody that you necessarily want to go say, hey, we have to go take that person away, but they're all capable of beating you. You just went down the entire list of those skill players that can make plays, and I think that's going to suit them well. Where I go back to watch this team, especially over the weekend, and I think the growth of Drew Aller, even from West Virginia to now, is the red zone efficiency and the anticipation at the quarterback position. I think when the field gets smaller and there's not enough room there, it is hard as a quarterback. And I think that's the growth really from last year to this year for him. When you see him inside the 20, inside the 15, inside the 5, whether it's getting the ball out or running it himself, just those types of decisions that you have to make without hesitation. That, to me, was dramatically noticeable in this game because there's a lot going on, right? Somebody's talking to you. There's a bunch of shifts and motions, tight end trades, etc. But I look at that, and then I go to, okay, tight games, big games. What happened last year? What may happen this year? It's going to come down to those types of post-snap decisions. And I just go to that anticipation for him was a huge jump that I watched on tape, and I think that it'll continue as their schedule continues to get more challenging in conference play.
Well, the schedule continues to get more challenging. It's going to get significantly more challenging coming up this weekend with Illinois coming to town. James Franklin calling for whiteout energy in that game. He may actually be calling subliminally for a whiteout. We will see. But the Illini coming in off a high. They took down Nebraska in overtime. Luke Altmaier was fabulous. Threw for 4 touchdowns, just 6 incompletions. And then the defense came up huge when it needed to. 5 sacks, including 3 on Nebraska's 4 snaps in overtime as the Huskers dropped yet another one-score game. Let's start with the Illini, Yogi. This is the first time they have ever beaten 2 ranked teams in September. They, of course, beat Kansas at home earlier. The thing that stood out to me, I thought both of their coordinators had great games. I mean, Barry Lunney was dialing stuff up. But Aaron Henry, remember that defense took a step back last year in his first year as a coordinator. He had a lot going on. He had, just had twins at home. He's calling plays for the first time ever in his career. And they took a little bit of grief with that defense. And to say he has bounced back in a big way would be an understatement. Offense and defense both really in sync in this game.
Yeah, I think, look, if we go back to the preseason, I think Rutgers was kind of the sexy team we were talking about. Now a month in, it's Illinois. I mean, they're the ones that are making a ton of noise. We wouldn't be shocked if they continue to win based on their style of play. Right, let's talk about the offense. You saw it on those highlights. The thing that stood out to me and maybe to viewers is you're playing from the gun and also under center. I mean, this is a pro-style offense that, again, started the show off with like adults in the room, in the running back room, the way they finished the game. And I just think, you guys have been at this for much longer than I in this league, but through a month, I think the best teams are the ones that just can lean on you and win physically. Go to the fourth quarter and just watch that game. It's a different ball game from an Illinois standpoint on both lines of scrimmage, offensively running the football, but then defensively. It was the book. You talk about defensive coordinator. What do you do against a true freshman late in the game on the line, when it's a home game and the place is, trying to charge you up? You bring heat, you bring pressure. They did all of those elements to a T late in the ball game, obviously, especially once it went into extra time and OT. I love that element of it, of just trying to make life really challenging for Dylan Raiola. I thought they did that when they needed to. He played a heck of a game. This was an awesome game. Stay up late for this one. It was so much fun. But at the end, the best teams that I think will separate in this league are the ones that can win late and lean on you late. They did that on both sides of the ball on Friday night.
To build off what both you guys are saying, like, you can just look at, I was impressed by both quarterbacks, but the throws and plays Raiola had to make were much more challenging than what Altmaier had to make, right? And that's a credit to the scheme of Aaron Henry. It's a credit to the scheme of Barry Lunney. And Yogi, when you're talking about leaning on that run game and physicality, then your coordinator has to be able to use that data against the defense. And how many times did you see a 3rd and 1, 4th and short situation where they scheme someone into the flat? You got a big man touchdown to Brandon Henderson?
Lineman, yeah.
Come on, baby. That's awesome. A lot of coordinators may be hesitant to even call that. And not only did he call it, the team executed it, and they got to celebrate. They break the run in overtime. No hesitation therein. It was just a clean performance. Third down, I felt, Tony White's defense was aggressive. They've been getting pressure all year long, but they play zone coverage behind it. Barry Lunny was able to scheme looks where Altmaier, it felt like he was throwing into wide open holes in zones all day long.
I will say this about Nebraska, and then we'll move on. I know in a lot of ways, maybe to the fan base, it feels like the same old story, right? 31st loss in their last 39 one-possession games. I thought Matt Rule had a great quote afterwards where he just said, hey, we're not a bad football team.
No.
And there was so much good that came out of this game. You talked about how well Dylan Raiola played. The defense was up and down, but certainly had a few moments. But I think the bottom line with Nebraska was just a couple of plays. It was a couple of miscues. They seemed to wear down a little bit down the stretch. But it felt like before you had to squint to see progress being made at Nebraska. I don't think you have to anymore. This is a good team. It's going to win a lot of games. It's absolutely going to play in a bowl game. One other conference game to get to, and this one was a mismatch. Washington's Big Ten debut could not have gone better. 24-5 against Northwestern. Will Rogers hit Denzel Boston for a couple scores. But Washington's defense was the story. They held the Cats to 112 yards of total offense, their fewest in a game this century. Northwestern ran 9 plays inside the 4-yard line, and they had 3 points to show for it. We wondered how the Huskies would bounce back after that loss to Washington State, and Yogi, the answer was emphatically.
Yeah, they didn't flinch. And I think they were just a better team when you watch the game. I think the execution offensively, they weren't perfect, but you look at some of the things they did from under center, play action pass, and you're watching quarterback Will Rogers turn his back to a defense, throw a post to Denzel Boston on a double post. Like, we haven't seen that play in a long time in major college football. Like, they're running some cool West Coast stuff with a guy who came from the air raid. So I think that's pretty fun. And then defensively, you're right. A week ago, they struggled against Washington State. Quarterback run game. There were just some elements in that ball game that you saw them clean up. They played extremely sound and efficient. I think from jump, every Jed Fish coach team has been this, which is a tough out. It's going to be the same thing on Friday night when they go to Piscataway. I think it's a blackout. Is that what they're calling it in Rutgers? So it'll be hectic. But I think this team, their execution is what I continue to see growing. And then I'll go to the post game of what Jed Fish said, which I love, which is, this is year one for everybody. Like, we're all learning in real time, whether it's meals before the game, whether it's bouncing back after adversity and a loss against your rival, winning in a unique game, which was Saturday night. And that's what's going to be this team's story throughout the entire year. And I think both coordinators are going to put them in position to be in every single game they compete in.
Around 2015, 2016, like the mid-2010s is when they had their defense. They called themselves the death row defense. But outside of that, like this program has been about offense. You got Michael Penix, you got Romadou, like loaded with offensive talent last year. But then you bring in Belichick, and to your point, Dave, like the defense to have 9 plays there down low in their red zone and give up 1 field goal. Really impressive. Elijah Jackson with the play of the game, running down and making that tackle to give the defense some ground to stand on. And then they picked it up for him and held Northwestern to a field goal. Big picture on the offense, you lose Penix, you lose those weapons outside. They got some weapons in Denzel Boston and Giles Jackson and Jeremiah Hunter. They got a great tight end, Jonah Coleman. To me, the ceiling of this team, though, that offensive line was the difference for them last year. They, of course, won the Joe Moore Award. That's the biggest difference between last year's team and this year's team.
And Northwestern having some massive offensive line problems of their own. They were without 2 starters. 2 more players went down during the game. Cam Porter, their lead back, didn't play. But you've got to be able to get under center and get a yard.
Yes.
I mean, to go shotgun and throw the ball 4 times from the 2-yard line is 1 pass yard in the second half for the Wildcats. Rutgers is 3-0. They took on former conference foe Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, a place where they had lost 6 straight and came out with a 3-point win. Went over 400 yards of offense for the 3rd straight game, exceeding last year's season total. Jay Patel won it with a late field goal. 3-0 for the 4th straight time. First time they pulled that off in more than 60 years. And Yogi beating a power conference opponent on the road. Pretty good. A nice start here for Rutgers.
I've played in that stadium, fellas, and that place rocks. I mean, they got the turkey collars out. I mean, and it was pretty quiet for the majority of that game. But in the back end of that fourth quarter, it took everything from Rutgers to make a stand. How about the tipped pass off a blitz from Robert Longerbeam? I mean, that was so fun to watch him, like the captain, the rockster was born in Virginia. Ultimately, though, this was a great team win. That's where I net out on this. You look at the quarterback play, I think really efficient. Find another running back, not just the stud that we all love in Kyle Monangai. So overall, I just think that's that. I think, again, kind of like UW, we said in the previous block, who faced, of course, Rutgers on Friday night at home for Rutgers. This is a team that's, again, looking like another tough out. They're doing a nice job offensively. How about the creativity? They need a screen. They dial one up that they had in the playbook from a year ago. So just overall, I think this is a group that just continues to get more and more confident, making plays when they have to. I think a lot of immature teams probably lose this game late. And I think that's the thing I took away from this, watching it back this morning, is just the plays needed late in the game. I think in both sides of the ball, they really met the moment, even on special teams, kicking that field goal.
Momentum works two ways. You know, there's initiating momentum, which they did early. Then there's surviving momentum, which is what they had to do late. And the good thing is, for Rutgers at least, is a lot of it was self-inflicted. Right? They had two different chances to put the game up, to put themselves up by 3 scores. One of them, they're on the plus territory. They decided to throw it 3 straight times. Callie McManus has been playing great, but he gets sacked twice, and all of a sudden you have a 53-yard field goal miss. You're 4th and goal from the 1. 2 great running backs, a great offensive line. They decided to throw the ball. They didn't get it. A field goal would have put them up by 3 scores. So there was a few chances that they had to seal this game where they fell short. The good thing was, like Yogi just said, they survived the momentum. They throw it out to Ian Strong. He makes a big play, and they win the game. All good. But to me, as frustrating as that second half was, it still shows a lot about the veteran presence of this team to be able to survive, particularly on a road in a tough environment.
And they only had their longest run of the game was 12 yards. And you think about Rutgers last year, if their longest run of the game is 12 yards, they are in deep trouble. But to me, the difference is Ethan Kaliakmanis.
Yes.
He's completing about 63%. They were under 50% last year. So they can throw the ball if they need to this year. That is a huge difference. They are still perfect. So is Indiana. How about this 4-0 Hoosiers? They dismantled Charlotte 52-14. They've scored 202 points through 4 games. That is the most in any 4-game stretch in school history. Curt Cignetti, the first IU coach ever to start his career with 4 straight wins. That dates back to 1887. That is a while back. That feels statistically significant. Cignetti did point out afterwards, Yogi, that the schedule has not been that tough, and that story checks out. Their opponents are a combined 3-11 on the year, but still, they're not just beating people. They are manhandling people. You were there. You saw it in person. What do you make of the Hoosiers?
Well, what I like is that there was some adversity for them, really, for the first time in the season. The UCLA game was back and forth. There was a moment for the Bruins to kind of get back in it 2 weeks ago. They didn't take advantage of that. The same deal here. I mean, it's 17-14, and all of a sudden you're saying, ooh, here comes Charlotte with all these big-time transfers from all these schools that we all know so well. And boom, they were just blank, didn't do anything the rest of the ball game. And I like that for Coach Cignetti. He knows it. He's a truth teller, as you just referenced. He knows who they have faced, but he also knows what he's building. And I think when you get there under the hood a little bit, and you talk to Aiden Fisher, you talk to Curtis Rourke, and you learn about the confidence that Coach Cignetti has and how it's grounded in, we're going to show up and we're just going to go to work. And everybody trusts that the plan that is laid out every day at work is one that can lead to success. And I think this team has made a transition, and I've always felt like good teams, they hope they can win. They hope things go well. That was probably Indiana a year ago, maybe even them early this season. The really special teams, they know they can execute. They know when they call a play or they call a blitz or they call a scheme that it's going to work. That's where this team is. And I'll just go back to one last thing from Coach Cignetti. He tells his team before every game, don't be surprised when we come back in here and we do what we just did to UCLA, to Charlotte, to whomever on their schedule. And I just think about being a player hearing that from my head coach before the game, and I'm saying, if I was hoping, if I was on the fence a little bit, if this dude is saying that with all the success he's had, then okay, I can't wait to lay it on the line and put it out for the rest of my teammates and the staff.
In football, as the season goes on, teams start to take on the personality of their head coach. And I got some alliteration for you here, Dave.
Okay.
Indiana is playing with the confident conviction of their coach, Curt Cignetti. That's exactly what I see on tape, man. That's what I see with Curtis Rourke. It's time we start including him in the conversation of best quarterbacks in the conference. I mean, he's
I agree.
playing, right? I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
80% completion percentage last week. He's been putting up numbers all year. 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Regardless of the opponent, though, you see a guy that is well prepared. He's anticipating throws. He's getting to the top of his drop. One hitch, bang, the ball's out on time. And they're sharing the football. 6 rushing touchdowns by 5 different players. Like, these are good, encouraging stats that, regardless of who they're playing, you could say is a very positive for the Hoosiers.
They did such a great job accumulating talent. It's not as if they are just leaning on 1 or 2 superstars outside of Rourke, who, as you say, has been fabulous. It's amazing how many players they brought in from so many different places who hadn't played together before. They have 0 turnovers through 4 games. A good work. I didn't know we were in a high school English class.
How about that, right?
Really,
Neither did I, but
that was
I know
really
you
good.
appreciate
Somewhere
that.
there is a former teacher who is bursting with pride hearing Jake do that. Okay, how about Indiana getting Maryland next week? And they'll get a Terps team that is hot on their 15th straight non-conference game, tying a school record, beat Villanova 38-20. Ty Felton continues to be the story. 14 catches, career high, 157 yards. His 4th straight game over 100 to start the season. He has 41 catches. That is 14 more than anyone else in the conference. It's the 2nd most in the nation. He's been great. His quarterback's been great. Really impressive game, Yogi.
Yeah, I mean, go look at the first half of the Virginia game, and you're like, who is this team? And then watch their last 6 quarters and say, oh, okay, this is this team. And Felton, of course, is a huge reason why. You go back and you watch all the throws to him. These are not like simple catches, little spot routes, you're wide open in a zone. I mean, he's got to go up and make plays. He is the guy that defenses are circling, saying we have to slow him down. Can't do it. And then I just got to give props to their quarterback, Billy Edwards. I mean, he's doing what you need to do in these types of games. Barely putting the ball on the ground, putting his team constantly ahead of the sticks. The decision-making from this quarterback has been really impressive. Can't wait, to your point, to this matchup. We've got 2 quarterbacks that weren't getting a lot of play, if any, in the preseason, and now they get to go head-to-head. I mean, I love this game for all of those reasons, because of their development within their systems.
This is what we can just expect from Mike Locksley. Explosive offense every year, but the defense is going to decide their future. And they had a really disruptive game last weekend. 3 sacks, 6 TFLs, holding Villanova to 231 total yards. Guys like Dante Trader and Ruben Hippolyte are stepping up. It's been a few years now where they've lacked that disruption, the pass rush from the guys up front and their linebackers. That's an encouraging game, to you guys' points. They're going to need it against the way Indiana's playing offense this weekend.
14th straight non-conference win, and ties a school record, and that's great. And those are impressive games because those include bowl games. But the reality is they haven't done it in conference play. 14-28 under Mike Locksley. And so now they get a chance to prove it. And lo and behold, they have a conference game coming up. This subtle reminder, Hoosiers and Terps, Saturday in Bloomington. We will be there. Big Ten Network football presented by Marathon. They'll kick it off at noon Eastern. All the fun starts with Big Ten Tailgate starting at 10 a.m. only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Back on Big Ten today, Rutgers was the only team that went on the road in non-conference play this week and came away with a win. Michigan State falling at BC. UCLA, rough second half as they lost in Baton Rouge. And Purdue went to Corvallis and dropped a 38-21 decision to Oregon State. So let's run through those quickly. Start with the Spartans, Yogi. Banged up, particularly at receiver. Had every opportunity, frankly, to knock off the Eagles, but just too many self-inflicted wounds down the stretch.
Yeah, this is one that's going to bite them towards the end of the season. They've got a brutal stretch coming up, and this is a game that they should have won and put away, even though they had all the turnovers that you referenced, right? Drop a touchdown late, you think they got a chance to ice the game, put it away, and no, and here comes Boston College and Bill O'Brien and their team. So frustrating. I think for Aiden Childs, the biggest thing for him is you just got to make sure he doesn't lose confidence, right? He came in with such fanfare, such expectations, right? He kind of, got in his own way a little bit early on with some of the things that he said, and he has looked elite at times, and you see that flashes, and then he has looked like, hey, man, this is going to force us to lose games if we keep turning the ball over at the rate that we have. So cleaned up the penalties, Clearly need to clean up the turnovers, even with some of your key players out. To me, not an excuse. I know it won't be for Jonathan Smith. This team will continue to grow, much like Jed Fish at Washington. A lot of these year one programs, not going to be easy out the gate, but that was a win that they could have gotten against BC.
10 turnovers for them. That is a Big Ten high. And Charles has thrown 7 interceptions, to your point. Jake, we wondered about how UCLA would respond after falling to Indiana. Went on the road to LSU, a really hostile and difficult place to play. And for the first 30 minutes, they responded really well, just weren't able to sustain it.
Yeah, that's kind of it for me. You know, so much of football is the mental side. It's a mental battle, and it's been frustrating to start the year. Of course, that game versus Indiana was very frustrating. It was hot this past weekend. I think what's really encouraging is you can always win with guys that care and they play hard, and they clearly cared. They came prepared. They gave LSU a tough run, just didn't have enough down the stretch. And I just think that's where they're at as a program right now. Look, they lost maybe the defensive rookie over the year, Liatu Latu. They lost some talent to the NFL. It's going to take some time while they reload the roster, but they care. That's okay.
Deshaun Foster referred to it after the game as baby steps,
yes.
And perhaps that's kind of what you're getting at. And finally, Purdue, another team that we wondered how they would respond after the worst loss in school history against Notre Dame, another tough outing against Oregon State. What did you make of it, Yogi?
Well, I think it's kind of the opposite of the UCLA one. Or, we saw some incremental growth, I think, for the Bruins. I think while it wasn't what it was against Notre Dame, I still think for Purdue, the experience they have with Hudson Card, I just expect them to move the ball with a little more efficiency. Defensively, they went up against a team that just owned the time of possession in this ball game, and Purdue rarely had the football, especially in the first half. But overall, this is a team that doesn't have time to feel sorry for themselves. They got a tough game coming up. They've got to find a way to score some points. And in this offense, that should be what this scheme does. It should be scheming more guys open. I want to see Hudson Card come back and play some of his best ball this weekend.
He has completed just 43% of his passes the last 2 games after that great 24 of 25 outing against Indiana State. Time to go around the Big Ten. We start with Nebraska volleyball, which swept number 4 Louisville on the road yesterday. Just 4 days after they swept second-ranked Stanford, Nebraska's won 7 straight as they enter conference play. Speaking of which, the big board highlighting some of the best matchups this week. Huskers get things going at home against UCLA Friday night. Penn State Purdue will be huge Wednesday night. Got 2 top 10 teams there. A match you can see on the Big Ten Network, Wisconsin, Minnesota to follow. The football weekend starts Friday night as Washington visits Rutgers. Mentioned Maryland, Indiana, Little Brown Jug up for grabs in Ann Arbor. Wisconsin at the Coliseum. We got Illinois, Penn State. Late kick out west, Ducks and Bruins. So that is a look ahead. How about one last look back? We need some helmet stickers. The top individual performances from the week that was. Yogi Roth, lead us off.
Well, I'm going to go to the run game because why not in the Big Ten? You got to go to Michigan. It's so impressive watching this running back group led by, there you see his name right there, Mr. Mullings. That was awesome. Just leg drive running through tackles, especially when they needed him most. Got to go tight end just because we got a great tight end on the show, but Mr. Warren did everything that you'd want to do or probably dream of do, right, Jake, at the quarterback position. And then I got to go to my confident conviction of Coach Cignetti. Nice job by him getting this team to truly believe in him and this team and their style of play, undefeated. The first time in the history of the program as the head coach winning the first 4.
The use of alliteration has been awe-inspiring. We're going to go onomatopoeia, I think, next week and see if we can work that in as well. Who are your helmet stickers?
Well, we talked about them already. I got to start with Luke Altmaier, just willing his team to victory. Really such an impressive win, and they'll need it again now going on the road. Tough environment versus Penn State. Kaleb Johnson, #1 in the FBS in yards. Seriously, could be the best running back in college football. There's some great ones. And I think for Josiah Stewart, we're watching a guy in real time make himself millions of dollars. Like, this is a guy that is climbing, rising, accelerating up draft boards. He was unstoppable in the game versus USC.
Their front 4 was outstanding. And Kaleb Johnson, I mean, those numbers are amazing. He has nearly 700 rushing yards.
And they're going to keep handing it to him
because
they have to.
The season.
Yeah.
On pace for over 2,000. Pretty remarkable stuff. This was fun.
It was.
Thanks to Jake. Thanks to Yogi Roth. We'll see you next time on Big Ten Today.